Hi, welcome back to meetrabbits.org. So I have gotten a lot of comments, a lot of questions, both here on the YouTube site and also on the website meetrabbits.org. And the questions people are asking is, what are your cages? Do you like them? How are they? Can you talk more about the cages? And it's a great question because cages are your biggest investment by far. So you want to know that what you're investing in is going to serve your purpose, last, give you a good setup. And you know, I think that a lot of people really like the look of the stacking cages, like the setup they see here. Now, you know, hanging cages are an option. Outside rabbit houses, which would be sort of like a standalone lean-to structure with a roof that the cages slot into. There are a lot of different options out there. I like the stackable cage system, and I really like it because it allows me to maximize the space in here by going up. You know, I'm not relegated to one cage per footprint. You know, I can get 2-3 tiers on some of these. Actually, I should say that all of these cages can be 3 tiers. The only reason that some of them are only 2 tiers are just because of my needs and space considerations and burn considerations. So if you look over here, you know, where I have a stack of 3 and then sometimes a stack of 2, and that's because I've got something like the window behind it that I want to leave some access to. That's just a management issue as far as that goes, but they all can be stacked 3 high, and that is for all of the systems that I'm going to discuss today. These buck cages can be stacked 3 high. I will say that when I had them over here and I did have them 3 high, they were a little more wobbly than I would have liked. And of course, I'm putting does in there that are getting bred, which means a lot of running and chasing and action in there. And I just didn't love it. 2 is more secure, and I have no need to keep more than 4 bucks. To be completely honest, I don't even need to keep 4 bucks. That's just because of how I want to mix and match and play with my breeds and genetics. So probably one of the bigger questions is the DuMor cages, which are all the black cages that you see in here. They come from Tractor Supply. I am not aware that they are available from any other seller, but maybe they are. They seem to be pretty exclusive to Tractor Supply Company. So if you have a Tractor Supply Company near you, these could be an option for you. And these are by far the cheapest cages you're going to get. Now, there's a lot of what I call cage shaming out there. I see it on Facebook groups. I see it on websites. I see it in comments. I see it sometimes even in videos. And I'm not really keen on that. I don't want to shame anybody into any cages. I don't want to tell anybody, buy this, don't buy that. I started with the Tractor Supply cages for a few reasons. One was the price point. They were cheap and available. Well, not cheap, but cheaper. And I could get a hold of them. They were available. And a lot of the cages, when I was adding a lot of my cages, was during around the time of COVID. I had cages before that I did start with, but at that time, there were some real supply and availability issues, and DuMor was pretty consistently available. I know people who bought breeding rabbits from me at the time that wanted to get into meat rabbits, especially that was a time when people wanted to be more self-sufficient, and they ordered Bassy KW cages and they were months behind. I had to hold a rabbit for someone, and I only did it because it was a family friend. I had to hold a rabbit for an extra 2 months before they could get her. Guess what? That is an entire litter of kits that she should have had on the ground growing out to feed her family. So, you know, when you take factors like that into consideration, I'm really not into telling people, no, you know, you have to buy the expensive cages. I get that you get what you pay for. I get that there is a quality issue, but there's a lot of nuance that goes into deciding your cages. So first I'll tell you what I've got in here, and then I'll talk a little bit about 2 brands of cages that I do have. Like I said, every black cage in here is a Tractor Supply, a DuMor cage, and of one size or another. I've got 30 by 36 that I use for breeding does because they need the nest boxes, they need the extra space. I have grow out cages, 24 by 24, bank of those here. And I have the 30 by 30s for the bucks that obviously don't have nest boxes ever in with them, but they do live their entire life long. You know, the grow outs, they're going to be gone by the time they are 4 months old, but these guys are living for years in these cages, so I want them to have something with more room. I also want more room in there when they're breeding the does, because what I don't want, like in too small of a cage, is for them not to be able to move and maneuver, and someone gets stuck in a corner and you can't get her to lift, or he can't get behind her. That can become an issue. The other brand that I have is Pet Lodge, and this is a pretty new addition to me. I will have an upcoming video on the build of these cages because they come completely unassembled and you have to do all of it. It was a bit more than I realized when I ordered them, but it was okay. You know, all in all, I'm happy with the cages. I'm happy with the stacking system. But the reason that I'm going with Pet Lodge, I'll discuss in a second with the Tractor Supply, the DuMor. These are a little more expensive, but a lot of different sellers and vendors, so shop around for them. You know, and they're galvanized and they're metal. They are a more mid-priced brand between the DuMor and something like the KW or the Bass cages. So little more affordable, galvanized, a little sturdier in my opinion, but we'll get to that too. So let's go over the Tractor Supply cages first. I have cages in here that are 5 years old, and I have seen people on the forums, and I'm not even sure they've ever used the cages, but they get on there and go, you'll only get a year out of them. I'm not sure how you made that judgment if you don't actually use the cages, but no, that's not true. I can tell you firsthand, the oldest cages in here are Tractor Supply cages, and they are 5+ years old. Have I had some issues with them? Well, first of all, there's a little bit of a trick to the DuMor cages, and that is that you want to reinforce them at the seams. So if we look over here, when I pop these up, because these are kind of modular cages, they basically come folded in on themselves. You pop them up, they kind of, you kind of fit the wire into that little hook, you know, they alternate in and out, and then the top goes on again inside the bracket, and that's it. And that part of it comes together in minutes, but I always reinforce these cages. I use the cage clips, the early ones. Some of these have zip ties as well, because early on, before I had the cage clips and pliers, I just did them with zip ties, which has also been perfectly fine. This one here, I can tell you that this is one of the older cages, because this is a cage that I obviously had sort of refurbished. Not really refurbished, I didn't do much to it, but in the springtime I took out the cages, power washed them all, and then I hit any of the areas that showed some rust with Rust-Oleum. So I basically sprayed every cage over with Rust-Oleum, and that's done a good job of keeping them going. And I've only done that once in 5 years. So some of the cages were newer when I did that. Some of them were the original 5-year-old cages, all in about equal shape for that process. People say they rust. They are powder coated. Yes, they get some rust. Even galvanized cages are going to get rust at some point, and I can prove that because if we look over here, here's a galvanized cage, and oh look, it has rust. It's not as if galvanized doesn't ever rust. The rust that I've had has been surface rust. I've never had anything rust through. You do tend to get more of it on the slides, the door slides, and most of these work pretty easily, but not gonna lie, they're a Chinese product, and their quality control is not always up to standard, although I guess that isn't only a Chinese issue, that could be any company's issue. But so sometimes they're a little bit inconsistent in like the length of this. One might be a hair, see this one's a little tighter but it did slide fully over. The other thing I think people don't do is they get it to here and they try and pull it, and on some of these that actually is not enough. You have to get it because there's a little bit of a catch on the inside that can catch those bottom wires. You really got to just turn it all the way up, pull it, slide it. They're good. But there are a few in here that and I think like Yarrow's cage might be one of them, where you can see that it just catches a little bit on that, and then sometimes I have to like put my finger behind it. Is that great? No, sorry for the camera angle, but I do need to close this. So, you know, put my finger behind it, pull it, slide the thing in, it's fine. You also easily could ignore or do away with these and like install a spring latch or something. I'm not saying that you should have to do all sorts of extraneous work to your cages, but over time, as you get some wear, or if you just don't like them, you know, that's an option. My biggest problem with the Tractor Supply cages is that starting with COVID and after, I saw a decline in quality control. And the issue that I get with them is, I don't know if I have one to show it, but I know I have one to show it if I can locate it. The issue is that sometimes the welds, so the welds between, you know, where they come together in the wires, and of course don't usually get it on the tops of the cages because they don't really see any weight or stress anyway, but sometimes the welds pop, and I've had it usually on the floors. I've also had it on some of like the sides, like there. I've been able to fix every one of them with a zip tie. Again, I don't love the fact that I've needed to do that, but there has been a fix for it, and I have been able to continue to use the cages. But that is the only reason that I am more hesitant now to recommend the cages than I used to. And again, those early cages, this was not something that I experienced with the cages early on. This is more recent. This is more of an issue now with the quality control. I can't say that I have enough long-term information or experience with some of these other cages to be able to say whether any of these issues pop up with them, because I just haven't used any of them long enough. But it is something that I've had some issue with on these DuMor cages, and it's something to consider. You can see here is some of the surface rust I talked about, but again, like in the spring, these will get a wash just because, you know, that gets rid of all the junked up, caked up corners, gets everything out of there. It's a good idea. I don't care what kind of cages you use to do that, and disinfect them and start fresh. And then I'll hit that with Rust-Oleum. That'll be gone. But this is more aesthetic than anything else. This is not a functional. This is nothing I consider to be really a health issue. The floor bottoms, you know, I don't really get much for sagging, and these are pretty heavy rabbits. I don't think that it is any more sagging than I get in any of the other cages. These cages over here, by the way, I should mention that I don't actually know who the manufacturer was of these, because these were given to me, but they are a nice sturdy galvanized cage, and it is something I modified by getting the stacking frames from Pet Lodge and ordering in trays to slide in for droppings. So I think that covers most of my points with the Tractor Supply. My overall review is this is going to be by far your most affordable option, and if this is what gets you into rabbits, go for it. The nice thing about the Tractor Supply cages when we talk about pricing is that if you have a Tractor Supply near you, you can have them shipped to the store and you just pick up your whole order in store. You don't even have to get out of the car. You can do it curbside pickup. So that is great because it saves you shipping charges, and the shipping charges on cages are high. Pretty much across the board, almost every company is around $20 per cage for shipping. So that's something to consider, and that is something that, for one, these cages start cheaper than the rest anyway, and then they become much more cheaper if you're able to go pick them up and don't have to pay shipping charges. I have had some shipped to the house when I was just in a really busy phase and just needed a cage or two. I wouldn't ship very many of them to the house. But yeah, those shipping costs add up, and it's kind of the same for Tractor Supply. And Tractor Supply is a little bit weird, I find, when you try to have something shipped to your house. You run into issues of ordering, availability, fulfillment, but only when I've had it shipped to the house. It's kind of odd that way. So, but again, it's easy to have it shipped to the store. It comes on the freight trucks, which also means they don't get quite so beat up. All the cages, and most companies ship with FedEx, and every single one of them, if you're getting them shipped to your home, I've never had one, and I've had stuff from Bass, KW, Tractor Supply, all of them, and they have some level of bend or damage. It's never been anything major, but it's just really hard to ship these metal things without them getting beat up in the shipping. And I do find that that is less of an issue from Tractor Supply, because of course they're getting things in big pallet orders. So it kind of saves on that too. So that's most of what I've got to say about the Tractor Supply DuMor cages. Do I think they're worth investing in? Yes. But before you start building, look them over for quality control issues right out of the gate before you do anything. Always reinforce the sides, because it makes a much sturdier cage. And I'm not talking about the wiggle and wobble on the frame. I'm talking about at these seams. If you pick that up, reinforced versus not reinforced, you'll feel it. It's a significant difference. Now the frame kits on them also, not much to them. They're, you know, a smaller measurement. Are they as nice? No. I actually am really happy with the frame kit on the Pet Lodge cage, and like I said, I've even modified those for other brands of cages. I do think you probably could modify them, but you'd have to really figure out, because their sizes run differently, so it would be more difficult to actually apply them to the Tractor Supply cages. Pet Lodge, let's talk about those for a little bit. So they're, like I said, galvanized cage, pretty good metal. I have no pops in any of those welds. They've been really good. And the frame kits, you kind of build these, that will be easier to see when we do eventually get those build videos up. They make a really nice sturdy unit, even though I have 3 big cages here. You know, they're all 36 by 30 cages, and these are 5-foot cages, and I've had litters of grow outs in these, and they're nice and sturdy. The Tractor Supply, like I said, a little more wiggly. If you can butt them up against each other like I do here, it gives them some additional support. If you've got a wall or you know, a pole, something like that you can do it with, you can do that. It helps out. I would not say that even if they are freestanding in, say, like a single unit, and I have had stacks, especially of the 30s, that were standalone, I don't think the wiggle you get in there is anything that's any worse than if you were hanging the cages. But I just like a nice solid surface for everybody. But you can see in here, there's nothing crazy going on for anyone here. So, but the Pet Lodge, they really do have a nice frame. Lots of sellers, even from some of my local small independent farm stores, sell these. I've seen them at Runnings. I've seen them on Amazon. I bought these ones from Jeffers Pet Supply. But there's a lot of different sellers out there, and when you have more sellers, you can do some more shopping around and you know, comparison. I got a pretty good price from Jeffers, including, you know, all things considered, the shipping and everything, so that was good. But I also want to say that I didn't buy all of the setup from Jeffers. I bought the cages and I bought the frame kits. The prices were just fine from Jeffers on that. And I bought the trays actually from KW Cages. Trays are kind of all over the place in pricing. And KW happened to have the best combination of price, shipping, availability for what I needed at the time. I also have bought trays, these trays, which are basically the same thing. I've bought them from All Things Bunny, but these are only 24 inches deep, and I think that might be why I purchased from them, was because that was kind of an odd size that I needed to find. Having said that, well, you can see that I've got one of those KW trays down here in a Tractor Supply cage. The only reason being that this is a little bit for a different day too, but if you look at, well, I don't know that we can see it, but if you look at the plastic trays, they have these ribs in them. So when you're emptying and scraping them out outside, I use like just a mudding scraper type of thing. But you have to get in between every one of those. Most of the stuff will dump out, but sometimes you got a little that you want to scrape out. And the galvanized, the metal frames, they're all one. There's pros and cons to both of those. I don't think any of these are bad. The plastic's nice and light. They last a long time. They'll never rust. I do occasionally crack one and have to replace it. And usually that's on the larger cages because they're fuller and they have more weight in them. I don't break too many of these 24-inch ones. I literally think one in all these cages in 5 years I've replaced of a 24. So, but it's winter time and I was having some issue getting some of the frozen stuff out, and I wanted to see how well these fit and went. So this week, that's a little bit of an experiment. Not much of an experiment. I think we can see it works. Just something to think about there. I do not have one in here, and maybe I can come back and let you guys know if I think of it another day. I'm pretty sure that these black Tractor Supply trays should slide right into those Pet Lodge, and those are a lot cheaper. So that's something to think about. Maybe get your cage and your frame set up, shop for the trays. Don't know why they're so all over the place, but they are. So far, yes, I really like these Pet Lodge cages. The two downsides to them. One is that the assembly was more than I bargained for, but I shouldn't overstate that either. It wasn't well described or listed in the listing when I bought them, so I didn't realize that these didn't come the way the Tractor Supply cages come, where the bottoms, the sides are all attached at the bottom. You pop them up, you reinforce, you put the top on. These came in, just everything was a single piece, and it all had to be fitted together, matched up, put together, and then clipped together. Also, the clips come with the kit, but the J pliers that you need to apply them do not, so know that and buy the pliers. So that's not a huge deal, like I said. It's just that I came out here one day thinking I had an extra hour. I was going to put these cages together, and I opened it up and went, oh, well, that's a bigger project than I bargained for. I did find that it was a lot easier to tack them together with the zip ties and then go around and do all the cage clips. So again, not a big deal. I am not particularly mechanically inclined. I handled it. I got it done. It was no problem. The only other thing I don't love about them is the height. So all of the Tractor Supply cages, the 24s are 16 inches high, and the 30s and 36s are 18 inches high, which is particularly nice for the does, because when they have the nesting boxes in here, you know, if she's getting bothered and wants to get away from them, she can easily pop up there, and they do it a lot. They'll sit on top of those boxes and they've got a place to escape. I don't think they're going to be able to do that in here. Not the end of the world, but these cages are only 16 inches high. Let's see, those are 18 and those are 16. So the 16 to me is not an issue with the grow out cages. Again, they're not living their lives in there. They're not having nest boxes in there. Not a big deal. I would have preferred if we had that extra 2 inches on these Pet Lodge cages. So I am going to continue to be more inclined to have the does that are breeding in these bigger cages. And once I settle out and decide, you know, probably paring down a couple of these does anyway, these will probably be more of like a transition weaning cage that helps me cycle through and be able to run more litters through when I can kind of step everybody up into different cages according to age. But other than that, like I said, the cages are nice and sturdy. They went together, not too much issue. You know, that's what I've got to say about those. So the big deciding factor with all of these cages is the price. And I have nothing against KW and Bass cages. I'm sure they're awesome cages. They're beautiful systems. They're really expensive systems. And at first glance, the cages themselves may not look that expensive, but you got to add the shipping costs. And when you add the shipping costs, it goes up and up and up, and it's per cage and it's per tray, and you know, there's all sorts of things, even to the point where Bass actually has some upcharges for things like how the doors open. So, and I should mention that on the Pet Lodge cages, these, I have them opening to the side, but that's not how they're supposed to. That was actually supposed to be mounted inside up here and swing up and open to that. Well, that's a problem when you have stacked cages and you're trying to pull does in and out. So I want them opening to the side flush, just like you saw, just like they always do. And you have to pay more to have that done on a Bass cage, which is a little bit funny to me. It's a little bit funny to me that everybody thinks that opening up and having to try and hook it in there while you're working rabbits is a better solution than just opening it to the side. But it is what it is. So I'm going to really encourage you on this one to go over to meetrabbits.org, and sometimes our videos post before our articles because we need to do that to link it into it. So if you don't immediately see it, come back in a few days and keep checking back and see that article. And I'm going to tell you that because I've got 3,000 words of a guide here. I hope that doesn't scare you away in itself, but it's a lot of information. And I have searched out, for price comparison's sake, all of these cages, and I tried to compare as closely as I could, apples to apples. You kind of can't, but by that I mean I tried to compare the cage sizes to each other from each of those companies to the best of my ability. And then I go over some talking points like I did here, what I do and don't like about the cages, what I'm finding to be issues, and my recommendations. So I strongly urge you to go over there and find that so that you can see all this information in front of you. And I probably forgot some of the points that I wanted to make, and you'll find them in there, but it lays out in front of you the pricing. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, the 24 by 24 cages from DuMor, and of course these are all today's prices, could change, probably will, but usually if they go up, they're all going up kind of comparatively speaking, they'll probably all go up. Their 24 by 24 cages are $34.99. 30 by 30s are $39.99. And the 30 by 36, those doe cages back there, are $42.99. Again, if you pick them up at the store, you don't have shipping costs involved in that. Now, pretty much for all of these cages, but there is some exception for a few of the products. The frame kits are sold separately. The dropping pans are sold separately. That's pretty standard across the board. There are a couple exceptions, and one of them is that Tractor Supply offers, and only in the 24-inch cage, they offer a complete kit that comes with, it's the cage, it's the frame kit, and it's the dropping tray, plus a J feeder and a water bottle. I donate those to 4-H kids because I don't like using them, so they're no good to me, but they're still cheaper. Those kits, they end up cheaper by like $4, $3-4, and it's a nice compact box that's easy to pick up and carry home. The Pet Lodge cages, so they are for 24-inch cages, and again, these are only 16 inches high, so that's a little bit of a consideration, are $42.29 compared to the 24-inch cages from Tractor Supply at $34.99. 30-inch cages are $49.99 compared to $39.99 from Tractor Supply. And the 30 by 36, you can see, and I've got those, that's what's side by side right there. Those are $56.99 for the Pet Lodge, $42.99 for the Tractor Supply. So you can see where we start to get some price disparity there. Now, you may or may not need to add shipping to that cost for that, but you know, if you're buying them in a brick and mortar store, odds are their prices are going to be higher too. So it's just something you're going to have to shop around a little bit. I did have to pay shipping for those because I had them shipped to my home. I didn't have a good local option. They just didn't stock enough of them for me to be able to go out to one of my local stores and get them. And the shipping was averaging around $17 to $20 a cage. So, you know, we've got, say, you know, between like a $6 to $10 difference per cage in the different sizes of cages, but then we've got to add in that shipping cost of, let's call it $15. That becomes an even wider gap. The other two are Bass and KW, and I really only mention these guys because they're the ones that everybody says, buy them, buy them, buy them. And again, they're lovely, beautiful, high quality cages. I don't take that away from them at all, but they're really expensive, and I find that it could be cost prohibitive to help someone get into meat rabbits, and I want to see more people keeping meat rabbits. I think it's a great thing for people to do. So, you know, they're their 24-inch cage is starting at $38.90, and they are 18 inches high. So, you know, not a bad cage price, but you have to have them shipped. And the shipping cost is an average of $20 per cage. And then you also have to consider that you also have to have shipped the cage kit, the trays. The trays, again, you know, you may be able to mix and match. Again, this is information that's in the article, so you're probably going to really find it better laid out, easier to follow there. But that's what you're looking at. Their 30 by 30s are $58.45 compared to the $40 of the Tractor Supply. Their 36 by 30s are $67.20 compared to the $42.99. And when you start adding in those frame kits and the trays and the shipping, you know, add $20 to each of those cages, and suddenly their cages are twice as expensive as what Tractor Supplies are. KW cages are actually more expensive than the Bass cages, and their shipping is pretty high. The way I figured it for my area is about an average of $28 per cage. And again, then the frame kits and whatnot. But again, you know, I have bought things like the trays from them, and they were better there. But I don't know that they will be your best bet. KW also, I find their website's a little bit difficult to navigate, and they do have some options where actually probably some of the better pricing is to buy their stackable cages in a stacked cage kit. And if you, the prices are higher, but it seems to be the better way to buy them if you have decided to buy from them. So things to check out when you're on the website, when you're online. So I know I kind of talked a lot about cages, which seems like, how can you talk for half an hour about cages? But there's a lot that kind of goes into those considerations. And because I do have a few different brands here, and because I did go and do a lot of research on that pricing, and I have spent many hours myself when I've been going to replace cages on these websites, adding to cart, seeing what total comes out to be the best at the end of the day. You know, it's a lot to take in, but primarily I wanted to answer the question about the Tractor Supply cages, because I know a lot of people want to use them because everybody needs to save money. You know, you need to do the best you can. And I will never say don't buy them. I will say keep an eye on the quality control, especially now. Hopefully maybe they'll correct that. If they went back to being as good as the very first cages I bought 5 years ago, I wouldn't hesitate to say, yeah, go get them. And I still don't really hesitate to say that, but I will say just, you know, keep an eye. Here's an example is this was the last one I added from them, and I added it about the same time that I got the Pet Lodge cage. And their frame kits whether you use the frame kit or not, all of them have this black tab, and that's what the frame kit screws into. And on this cage, it wasn't there. And I didn't realize it until the very end. I already had this whole thing put together. All of these clips were on it. So I couldn't really return it. And I went, oh, what now? Well, thankfully my shiny new son-in-law was here. He's pretty handy. He said, I have an idea. Went down to my husband's shop, got some of this, whatever you call it. I'm sure some of you guys know exactly what this is called, but the hanging stuff for like pipes and whatever, he made it work for me. That's just an example. But otherwise, you know, the cage was fine. I didn't have any of the popped welds on it or anything like that. Had I checked the cage out before I opened it and started, I would have been in a better position. So I want to cut this off because I think I've talked long enough, and I appreciate you for being here and hearing all of this through, and I really hope that this helps you to make some decisions about the cages that you can afford and that would be the best for you. If anyone has any questions or comments, respectful comments, all questions welcome, pop them over in the comment section and I'll tell you what I know about the cages. Thanks again for listening. Head on over to meetrabbits.org. You can see more of that breakdown and pricing, and we'll be back again.